The Untold Story of Sirius Black, the Black family legacy. In the heart of London, at 12 Grimmauld Place, stood a house that held centuries of dark wizarding history. The Black family had lived there for generations, their ancestral home a monument to pure-blood supremacy. Ancient tapestries lined the walls, depicting a family tree that stretched back through the ages, connecting the Blacks to nearly every prominent wizarding family in Britain: the Malfoys, the Lestrangers, the Tonks, and dozens of others. But for young Sirius Black, this house was not a source of pride, it was a prison. Born into this world of prejudice and dark magic, Sirius was expected to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors. His parents, Orion and Walburga Black, raised him and his younger brother, Regulus, with iron fists and poisonous ideologies. The house echoed with talk of blood purity, of the superiority of wizards over muggles, and of the coming reign of Lord Voldemort. Walburga Black was particularly vicious in her beliefs. Even as a portrait after her death, she would scream at anyone who dared enter her sacred home, hurling insults and curses at those she deemed unworthy. Filth, scum, betrayers of their own blood, she would shriek, her voice carrying through every room of the dreary house. The great escaper Sirius grew older. The weight of his family's expectations became unbearable. At Hogwarts he had been sorted into Gryffindor, the first Black in generations not to be placed in Slytherin. This act of defiance was just the beginning. He befriended James Potter, a boy who embodied everything the Black family despised, someone who stood up for Muggle-born wizards, who laughed in the face of pure-blood supremacy, who chose love over hatred. The breaking point came during the summer before his 6th year. At 16, after one too many arguments about his shameful behavior and his blood-traitor friends, Sirius made a decision that would change his life forever. In the dead of night, he packed his few precious belongings, including a two-way mirror that would later become important, beyond measure, and fled Grimmauld Place. He ran straight to the Potters. James's parents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, welcomed Sirius with open arms. They had heard enough about his family situation from James's letters to understand what the boy had endured. Without hesitation, they took him in, not as a guest, but as a son. For the first time in his life, Sirius experienced what a loving family felt like. "You're safe now," Euphemia had whispered as she showed him to what would become his room. "This is your home for as long as you need it." The brother left behind, but Sirius's escape came at a cost. His younger brother, Regulus, only a year behind him at Hogwarts, was left alone to bear the full weight of their parents' expectations. Where Sirius had rebelled, Regulus submitted. He joined the Death Eaters, took the Dark Mark, and became everything his parents had hoped both their sons would be for years. Sirius believed his brother was lost to the darkness. He carried the guilt of abandoning Regulus, even as he knew staying would have destroyed him. What Sirius didn't know, what he wouldn't learn until much later, was that Regulus had discovered the truth about Voldemort's Horcrux. In 1979, Regulus learned of the locket hidden in the sea cave. Horrified by what Voldemort had done to his house elf Kreacher, and finally understanding the true depths of his master's evil, Regulus made his own act of rebellion. He took Kreacher back to the cave, drank the potion himself, and ordered the elf to destroy the locket. As the Inferi dragged him beneath the black waters, Regulus Black died, knowing he had struck a blow against the Dark Lord. Sirius never knew of his brother's sacrifice. He spent years believing Regulus had died as a loyal Death Eater, never learning that in his final moments his little brother had shown the same courage that had always burned in the Black family bloodline, the bonds of brotherhood that, the Potter, how Sirius flourished. He and James became more than best friends. They became brothers in every way that mattered. Along with Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew, they formed an unbreakable bond. They became animagi together, learned to transform into animals to help Remus during his werewolf transformations. Sirius's form was a massive black dog, earning him the nickname Patfoot. In this form, he could run alongside Remus during the full moon, providing companionship and control during the werewolf's most dangerous moments. These nights in the Forbidden Forest became some of Sirius's most treasured memories, moments of pure freedom and loyalty. When James and Lily were killed, Sirius felt his world collapse. The Potters had given him everything: love, acceptance, a family. James had been his brother, his anchor in a world that had rejected him, and now they were gone, betrayed by someone they had trusted, the gift that changed everything before his imprisonment. Sirius had given Harry something that never appeared in the films but would prove crucial later: a two-way mirror. This magical object, one of a pair, would allow Harry to communicate with him directly, no matter the distance. "If you ever need me," Sirius had told Harry during one of their conversations, "just say my name into the mirror. I'll be there." This mirror represented everything Sirius wanted to give Harry: constant connection, immediate help, the assurance that he would never be alone. It was a father's gift, a godfather's promise, a way to bridge the gap between the life Harry deserved and the life he was forced to live. The prison of Grimmauld, place when Sirius was finally freed from Azkaban but forced to hide. The cruel irony was not lost on him. The house he had fled as a teenager became his prison once again. Every room held memories of his tortured childhood. Every corner echoed with his mother's screams of pure-blood supremacy. But now he was trapped there, unable to leave, unable to fight alongside the Order of the Phoenix, unable to be the active force for good he desperately wanted to be. The walls that had once confined his body now confined his spirit. He spent hours staring at the family tapestry, his own face burned away by his mother's wand when she disowned him. He would trace the connections between families, seeing how the tentacles of pure-blood supremacy had spread through the wizarding world like a disease. He was surrounded by the ghosts of his past, haunted by the choices that had led him to this moment. The depression that settled over him was like a heavy cloak. He would pace the halls like a caged animal, his animagus form barely contained beneath his human facade. Harry's visits became his only source of light, the only thing that reminded him why he had survived Azkaban in the first place. The mentor in the shadows, despite his own struggles. Sirius threw himself into his role as Harry's, the guide to the wizarding world. He told Harry stories his parents had never had the chance to share about James's transformation from an arrogant boy to a man worthy of Lily's love, about Lily's fierce protection of those she cared about the small moments of joy and laughter that had filled their two brief lives. He warned Harry about Severus Snape. Though he struggled to be objective about the man who had tormented him at school, he helped Harry understand the politics of the wizarding world, the alliances and enmities that stretched back generations. He taught Harry about the importance of choosing your own family, of standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. Most importantly, he gave Harry something no one else could, the knowledge that he was unconditionally loved, that someone would always be in his corner, that the blood of heroes ran through his veins. The tragic end in the end. Sirius's greatest strength became his greatest weakness. His fierce loyalty and protective instincts, the same qualities that had made him run away from home to protect his own soul, led him to rush into danger to protect Harry when he believed his godson was in trouble. Nothing could have stopped him from trying to help. His last words to Harry were not captured in the film's words of encouragement, of pride, of love. Even as he fell through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, his last act was one of protection, trying to shield Harry from the truth of what was happening. The legacy lives on. Sirius Black's story is one of redemption, of choosing love over hatred, of breaking free from the chains of family expectation to become something better. He showed that your birth doesn't define your destiny, that courage can bloom even in the darkest of circumstances, that sometimes the greatest act of love is rebellion against everything you were taught to believe. In every choice Harry made to protect his friends, in every moment he chose to stand up for what was right rather than what was easy. Sirius's influence lived on. The man who had been cast out by his family for refusing to hate had raised a godson who would save the world through love. The Black family tapestry at Grimmauld Place still bears the burn mark where Sirius's face once appeared, a permanent reminder of the price of choosing good over evil. But in the end, Sirius Black proved that some bonds are stronger than blood, some families are chosen rather than born, and some love is worth any sacrifice. His story reminds us that heroism isn't about being perfect, it's about being willing to stand up for what's right, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. It's about finding your own path, even when that path leads away from everything you've ever known, and it's about never giving up on the people you love, no matter how dark the world becomes. In the end, Sirius Black was exactly what he had always wanted to be, not a black, but a man who chose his own destiny, who loved without condition, and who died protecting the future he believed in. The Marauder's map and secret passages. What the films barely touched upon was the true extent of Sirius's knowledge of Hogwarts secrets. As one of the creators of the Marauder's map, he had spent 7 years exploring every hidden corner of the castle. He knew passages that even the ghosts had forgotten, secret rooms that hadn't been discovered in centuries, and ways to move through the school that would have made even the founders proud. During his time at Hogwarts, Sirius had been the daredevil of the group, while James was the leader and Remus the conscience. Sirius was the one who pushed boundaries, who found the hidden lever behind the statue of the humpbacked witch, who discovered that the humping willow could be calmed by pressing a knot at its base. His photographic memory of the castle's layout had been burned into his mind during those midnight adventures, when he transformed into Padfoot to visit Harry at Hogwarts. He used every one of these secrets. He knew exactly where to appear to avoid detection, which paths the teachers never patrolled, and how to move like a shadow through the corridors he had once called home. The castle itself seemed to welcome him back, as if the stones remembered the young man who had once brought such life to its halls. The Azkaban years. Survival through memory. The 12 years Sirius spent in Azkaban were a hell that few could imagine, let alone survive. The Dementors fed on happiness, on hope, on every positive emotion until their victims were left as hollow shells. But Sirius had something most prisoners didn't. He had a secret that kept him sane. His ability to transform into a dog became his salvation. The Dementors couldn't affect him as strongly in his animagus form because animal minds were simpler, less complex. When the despair became too much, when the memories of James and Lily's deaths threatened to drive him mad, he would transform. As Padfoot, he could retreat into a simpler existence, focused only on basic needs and instincts. But even in human form, he held onto one driving thought: the truth. Every night he would whisper to himself the story of what really happened. How Peter Pettigrew had betrayed the Potters. How he had been framed. How Harry was out there somewhere, believing lies about his godfather. This truth became his anchor, his reason to survive when everything else was stripped away. He would practice conversations with Harry in his cell, imagining the day he would finally be able to tell him stories about James and Lily. He would remember every detail about his best friend's habits, how James ruffled his hair when he was nervous, how he would practice Quidditch moves even while walking to class, how his entire face would light up when Lily finally agreed to date him. The complicated legacy of the Black family. What made Sirius's story even more tragic was understanding the full scope of what the Black family had been. They weren't just another pureblood family, they were wizarding royalty, one of the Sacred 28, with connections to nearly every major wizarding household in Britain. The family motto, toujours pur, always pure, wasn't just a saying, it was a way of life that had shaped centuries of wizarding politics. The Black family tree revealed connections that explained so much about the wizarding world's power structures. Bellatrix Lestrange, Voldemort's most devoted follower, was Sirius's cousin. Narcissa Malfoy, Draco's mother, was another cousin. Andromeda Tonks, Nymphadora's mother, had been disowned just like Sirius for marrying a Muggle-born wizard. The family's influence stretched like a web through the Death Eater ranks, but the family had also produced heroes. Sirius's great-great-grandfather, Phineas Nigellus Black, had been a Hogwarts headmaster. His own grandfather had been a respected wizard who had served on the Wizengamot. The Black family had the potential for greatness, but their obsession with blood purity had corrupted that potential into something dark and twisted. Sirius carried the weight of this legacy every day. He knew that his name alone was enough to make some people fear him, to assume he shared his family's beliefs. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, who had rejected everything his family stood for, was the one who inherited the ancient family home and all its dark secrets. The relationship with Kreacher, one of the most complex relationships in Sirius' life, was with the family house self, Kreacher. This wasn't just a master-servant relationship, it was a battle for the soul of the Black family heritage. Kreacher had served the family for decades, absorbing their prejudices and beliefs until they became part of his very being. Kreacher. Sirius was a blood traitor who had abandoned everything sacred about the Black family name. The house elf would mutter insults under his breath, deliberately misunderstand orders, and treat Sirius with barely concealed contempt. But there was something deeper at work. Kreacher had genuinely loved Regulus, and in his twisted way he blamed Sirius for his favorite master's death. What Sirius never knew was that Kreacher held the key to understanding Regulus's true fate. The house elf had been with Regulus in the cave, had watched him drink the potion that would kill him, had been ordered to destroy the locket that Regulus died trying to eliminate. All those years, as Sirius grew increasingly frustrated with the Kreacher's behavior, Kreacher was mourning the loss of the one Black family member who had shown him kindness in his final moments. The tragedy was that both Sirius and Kreacher were mourning the same loss, the destruction of the Black family, as they had known it. Sirius mourned the family he had never had, the love and acceptance that had been replaced with hatred and bigotry. Kreacher mourned the family he had served faithfully, watching as it crumbled under the weight of its own darkness. The network of support. What the films didn't show was the extensive network of people who had helped Sirius during his years on the run. Before his capture, he had built relationships with witches and wizards who shared his beliefs, who were willing to risk everything to fight against Voldemort's ideology. There was Marlene McKinnon, a fellow Order member who had been killed along with her entire family. There was Dorcas Meadows, personally killed by Voldemort himself. There was Edgar Bones, Susan's uncle, who had been murdered with his wife and children. These weren't just names on a list, they were friends, allies, people who had shared meals and laughter and hope with Sirius before the war consumed them all. Even during his imprisonment, he had allies working to prove his innocence. Moody had never quite believed the official story. Kingsley Shacklebolt had quietly investigated inconsistencies in the case. Dumbledore himself had harbored doubts, though he had never acted on them. The wizarding world's justice system had failed Sirius completely, but there were individuals who had never stopped questioning the truth. The mentor's wisdom. In his conversations with Harry, Sirius shared wisdom that came from hard-won experience. He taught Harry about the importance of questioning authority, of thinking for yourself even when everyone around you accepts the official version of events. He had learned these lessons the hard way, through betrayal and false imprisonment. The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters, he told Harry during one of their conversations. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. He taught Harry about the complexity of human nature, using his own relationship with Severus Snape as an example. Yes, he and Snape had been enemies at school, and yes, Snape had been cruel and vindictive, But Sirius also understood that Snape's protection of Harry came from genuine remorse and love. Even if he couldn't bring himself to fully forgive the man, he shared stories about the importance of friendship, about how the bonds he had formed with James, Remus, and even Peter had sustained him through the darkest times. Even Peter's betrayal couldn't diminish the value of those early friendships, the way they had shaped him into the man he had become. The unspoken grief, perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Sirius's story, was his unspoken grief. He had lost everything: his family, his best friend, his freedom, his chance at a normal life. But he rarely spoke about this pain, instead focusing on Harry's needs in the fight against Voldemort. Late at night in Grimmauld Place, he would sit in the drawing room, surrounded by portraits of his ancestors, and feel the weight of his loneliness. He was the last of the Black family line, the end of a legacy that stretched back centuries. The house was dying around him, just as his family had died, victim to its own hatred and fear. He would look at the family tapestry and see not just his own burned-away face, but the faces of all the family members who had chosen darkness over light. He wondered sometimes if things could have been different, if he could have somehow saved Regulus, if he could have found a way to redeem the Black family name instead of abandoning it entirely. But then Harry would visit, or send a letter, or simply exist in the world as a testament to the love that had triumphed over hate. And Sirius would remember why he had made the choices he had. He had chosen to break the cycle of darkness, to ensure that the next generation would have a chance at something better. The final sacrifice when Sirius died in the Department of Mysteries. He died as he had lived, protecting someone he loved from the darkness that had consumed his family. His last sight was of Harry, safe and alive, the boy who had given his life meaning after 12 years of despair. But his death was not in vain. Every lesson he had taught Harry, every moment of love and acceptance he had provided, every example of choosing good over evil, these lived on. Harry carried Sirius's legacy forward, not just in his fight against Voldemort, but in his determination to build a better world. The man who had been cast out by his family for refusing to hate had raised a godson who would save the wizarding world through love. The rebel who had been branded a traitor had proven that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty is betraying everything you were taught to believe. In the end, Sirius Black had achieved something his pure-blood supremacist family never could. He had created a legacy that would endure long after the last echoes of their hatred had faded into silence. He had proven that family is not about blood, but about choice, not about heritage, but about love, not about the past, but about the future we choose to create.